So the article Why Are We Curious by Ignacio Morgado Bernal explains the psychological and scientific reasonings of why we as humans and our brains are curious. The reason being because there are neurons within our brains that are activated when the brain is introduced to something new. Researchers have argued that the neurons that are activated by curiosity are different neurons than other motivated behaviors such as looking for food. Within this study, they took rats and put them in a lab and gave them new items to see how they would react to them. And they found that the rats would sniff them, touch them, and kind of try to find out what they were more so than they would with items that they were already familiar with. So, with that being said, um, by conducting the research, it doesn't eliminate the fact that there are possible factors such as education, culture, and uprisings that create our curiosities. But after researching the question of why are we curious, another possible answer is that we are curious to cure our boredom. Um, and I just wanted to kind of go over that a little bit to explain my article. And I'd also like to explain why I chose this article and the grammatical forms that construct it. This article is interesting to me because, as a psychology major, it is beneficial and, in my opinion, important that I pursue my studies further than beyond the classroom or just trying to mix my classes that I take by kind of collaborating them. Um, as well as a potential Spanish major, definitely a Spanish minor. It's important that I understand the grammatical usage and forms. And in my opinion, this article utilizes many grammatical forms, and it truly helped me to understand the importance of Spanish grammatical structures and why they're important in Spanish literature and Spanish writing. Um, so, to begin understanding these grammatical forms, I wanted to start with the present tense because it's one of the first tenses that you learn during Spanish, and I think it has such an important role in Spanish writing and Spanish grammar because it's the foundation to Spanish grammar, in my opinion. Um, so, the first example of present tense being used in discussing the subject of the experiment, which is the rats and what they do when they're introduced to new things within their environment. I mentioned the present tense as an important Spanish grammatical construct because it has so many purposes. The present tense in Spanish can be used to discuss things that are happening in time, habitual actions or routines, to make statements, to even reference the future. And the present tense, I think, is mainly used to create a sense of immediacy as well as to talk about what's currently happening. Um, and it also creates the idea that, sorry, I already said that. Although I have found that within my article, they were using it more as in a sense of making a statement. And I think that's mainly what the present tense commonly is used for, especially in writing. More so in speaking, I'd say it's more for like what's currently happening versus making statements. But here in yellow, you can see my highlights of the present tense being used. Um, so yeah, the next thing that I wanted to discuss and talk about is the importance of the subjunctive tense. This article uses a lot of the subjunctive. It uses it many times throughout, and I believe that the subjunctive is another tense that's commonly used in Spanish, of course. But I also think that it's a complex tense because there's so many different purposes for it, as well as there are so many different forms, such as the imperfect, the present perfect, the past perfect, the future simple, and the future perfect subjunctive. And these different tenses of the subjunctive add to its complexity, um, which the complexity of subjunctive is why I wanted to include this in my video, is because there's just so many purposes for it, and it is used so commonly, especially in Spanish conversations, um, or so I have found. But to say the main purpose of the subjunctive commonly is to express doubt or possibilities. But in my opinion, it goes way beyond those limits. And I have highlighted the use of the imperfect subjunctive here in blue. The imperfect subjunctive corresponds with the subjunctive as a whole for the most part. Um, and within the situation that I highlighted, it expresses a potential action of the past tense. And I highlighted this sentence because it's a perfect example of how the imperfect subjunctive can be used and can just kind of say, like, oh, well, you know, could do this, or if you did this, or it's not necessarily, I know that didn't make a lot of sense, but doesn't necessarily express a form of doubt or like, if that makes sense. So the next thing that I would like to speak about is the usage of articles within Spanish. Um, I only like to mention this because the use of articles is not quite the same as it is in Spanish, in my opinion. Um, and it may be a small detail, but I believe that they carry an important role in Spanish grammar. There's two types of articles, definite and indefinite, and they must agree with the gender and number, as well as articles are useful for comparison, adjective agreement and position, adverbs and prepositions. Here in my article, I've highlighted some articles in green. I have found that the purpose for most of the articles within my reading is being used for a general sense. So saying like the or the professor, um, just kind of adding that little oomph to it. Another verb tense found within my article is the conditional. The conditional tense is used in Spanish as it is in English, and that is to express conditions. The conditional can also be used to express the future and the past. And here in my article, I highlighted an example of the conditional in pink. Um, in this situation, the conditional is being used to express would or should. This is important in the text because they're expressing a possibility or a probability. And in Spanish, conditional is used with its own verb forms. There are other forms such as the present and the conditional perfect. And the conditional, I believe, is important to Spanish grammar because it helps to express things that may happen in the future or things that happened in the past. As well as the conditional can be used with if clauses, and typically that is a very common form for using the conditional tense. And